Hello, my name is Andrew Boringa, and today I will be going over one of the most intense and groundbreaking confrontations of World War II, the Battle of Crete. This battle, which took place in May 1941, stands out for several reasons. It was the first time in military history that a major campaign was launched almost entirely by air, using paratroopers. It was also a battle that involved not just soldiers from many different nations, including Germany, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and Greece, but also the brave civilians of Crete who fought fiercely in defense of their homeland. Beyond its immediate drama, the Battle of Crete had strategic, tactical, and symbolic importance. Though it resulted in a German victory, the high cost of that success reshaped German military strategy going forward. For the Allies, the battle was a painful loss, but it also provided critical lessons that will be applied in future campaigns, including the Normandy landings. As we go through the details of the battle today, I invite you to not just consider what just happened, but why it mattered and how its outcome rippled through the rest of the war. Here's what we'll be covering. We'll begin with an overview of the battle, what happened, when, and where. From there, we'll explore the cause of the conflict, what motivated Hitler and the German high command to undertake such a risky operation, and what made Crete so important to both sides. Next, we'll examine the geography and logistical challenges of the island, which played a massive role in shaping the conflict. We'll then look at the objectives of both the Axis and Allied forces, what each side hoped to achieve, and how they plan to get there. We'll take a deep look at the key military leaders on both sides, then explore the tactics used during the campaign, including Germany's innovative but costly use of airborne troops. From there, we'll move into a role of technology in the battle, walk through a detailed timeline of events, and close with the aftermath and broader consequences of the campaign. Finally, we'll summarize why the Battle of Crete still matters today, both as a military case study and as a symbolic resistance, sacrifice, and global struggle. In early 1941, after the fall of mainland Greece, Adolf Hitler had a strategic choice to make. His eyes were increasingly fixed on the Soviet Union, and planning for Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the USSR, was well underway. But before the campaign could begin, he faced a lingering threat to Germany's southern flank, the island of Crete. British forces still held the island, and the German intelligence indicated that the Royal Navy was using it as a base for operations in the eastern Mediterranean. Crete's airfields and ports could potentially be used to launch attacks on Axis forces in the Balkans or North Africa. Hitler gave the green light for the invasion, codenamed Operation Mercury. This decision would set in motion the first major airborne assault in military history. The plan was audacious. Use paratroopers to take key positions on the island, overwhelm the defenders, and establish German control before the Allies could respond. What no one knew at the time was just how costly this operation would be and how it would change the future of airborne warfare forever. From the Germans' perspective, Crete was not just an island, it was a linchpin in the eastern Mediterranean. Its strategic value stemmed from its location, positioned south of mainland Greece and near the entrance to the Suez Canal. It served as a potential launching point for operations in North Africa, particularly into Egypt, where the British still maintained significant control. It also sat astride key maritime supply lines between Europe and the Middle East. If the Germans could control Crete, they would threaten Allied convoys and gain a forward base for air and naval missions. More importantly, control of Crete would deny the British a foothold in the region, limiting their capacity to intervene in Axis campaigns elsewhere. For Hitler, it was also a way to tie up loose ends before launching the much larger and riskier invasion of the Soviet Union. The logic was clear. Deal with Crete swiftly, secure the southern front, and turn eastward with confidence. What Germany underestimated, however, was the determination of the defenders and the challenges of attacking a rugged, mountainous island from the sky. At the time of the German invasion, Crete was occupied by a diverse group of Allied troops, numbered between 40,000 in total, around 40,000 total. These included British soldiers, Australian and New Zealand forces, collectively known as the Anzacs, and Greek troops, many of whom had retreated to the island following the fall of the Greek mainland. Together they formed what was known as the Crete Force, commanded by Major General Bernard Freyberg, a veteran New Zealander who had served with distinction in World War I. While the Allied troops had strong morale and local support, they were at a severe disadvantage. Many were under-equipped, having abandoned heavy weapons during the evacuation from Greece. Perhaps most critically, they lacked air cover. The Royal Air Force had withdrawn, leaving the island vulnerable to German air supremacy. Despite this, Crete Force was determined to fight. With the support of the Royal Navy, local civilians, and intelligence gained through code breaking, they prepared for what they believed would be a naval invasion, unaware that the true threat would come from above. Crete itself had presented unique challenges for both attackers and defenders. It is the largest of the Greek islands, stretching across 260 kilometers from east to west, and its interior is dominated by rugged mountains, steep valleys, and narrow coastal plains. These features made it difficult to move troops quickly across the island and posed serious problems for communication and coordination. For the Allies, this terrain made it hard to organize a unified defense. For the Germans, it meant that once their troops landed, they would face an uphill battle, literally. Adding to the complexity, Crete had few very large, flat areas suitable for aircraft landings. This was a key reason why the Germans chose an airborne assault in the first place. But even then, their paratroopers would have to land in hostile territory under direct fire and secure landing zones for future waves. The rugged geography of Crete played a decisive role in shaping the tactics and outcomes of the battle, turning it into a grueling fight for every hill, pass, and village. The invasion of Crete didn't arise out of opportunism alone. It was driven by a mix of strategic calculations and urgent military concerns. After the defeat of Greece, the Germans feared that the British would use Crete as a base for bombing campaigns and supply routes that would undermine Axis control in the Balkans. With British forces holding down the island and maintaining naval supremacy in the area, Crete represented a thorn in Germany's side. Taking it would not only eliminate that threat, but also showcase the power and innovation of the German military. Hitler and his generals believed that a swift and decisive airborne invasion would be enough to capture the island without overextending the Wehrmacht. Time was of the essence. With the Eastern Front looming, they needed to secure Crete before launching the invasion of the Soviet Union. Operation Mercury became a high-stakes gamble, one that Germany hoped would yield a fast, clean victory with minimum diversion from its broader war aims. The German decision was also shaped by fear and rivalry. The Soviets were rapidly gaining strength, and Hitler knew that any prolonged engagement elsewhere could compromise the timetable for invading the USSR. Yet allowing Crete to remain under Allied control could jeopardize Axis positions across the Mediterranean. The dilemma was clear. Ignore Crete and risk British interference in southern Europe and North Africa, or strike now and deal with the island swiftly. Adding to the urgency was the belief that the Allies were on their back foot. Many German commanders viewed that the garrison on Crete as demoralized and disorganized after retreating from Greece. This underestimation would cost Germany dearly. Though the Allies lacked heavy equipment and air support, they had high morale and support of the local population fiercely committed to defending their homeland. What the Germans saw as an easy victory quickly turned into one of the bloodiest campaigns of the early war. The Allies, for their part, understood the strategic importance of Crete. Even if they lacked resources to fully fortify it, they recognized the need to hold the island. Doing so would maintain pressure on German forces in the Balkans, support Greek resistance movements, and prevent the Axis from dominating the eastern Mediterranean. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill saw Crete as a critical outpost, one worth defending to the last man. There was also a symbolic value to the island. Greece has been one of the first European nations to resist Axis aggression, and holding Crete was a way to show continued support for the Greek people. It also sent a message to other occupied nations that resistance was still possible. For the Commonwealth troops stationed there, many of whom were young, far from home, and facing a powerful enemy, the defense of Crete was a matter of duty, courage, and pride. Because a traditional amphibious assault was deemed too risky due to the Royal Navy's strength, Germany made the bold decision to rely entirely on paratroopers and glider-borne infantry. This was an unprecedented move. Never before had an entire major military operation been carried out solely from the air. It was a calculated risk, banking on the element of surprise and the belief that German troops could establish a foothold before the Allies could respond effectively. But this gamble came with massive risks. Paratroopers are highly vulnerable during descent and immediately after landing, especially without heavy support weapons. Once on the ground, they had to fight their way to key objectives, airfields, towns, and supply routes, often while cut out from reinforcements. The German high command believed the shock factor for the assault would break Allied morale. What they didn't anticipate was how fiercely defenders and the Crete civilians would fight back. Crete's geography played a central role in the planning and execution for both the German invasion and the Allied defense. The island is long and narrow, stretching from east to west with mountainous interior and steep terrain that limited troop movement. This made it extremely difficult for either side to move reinforcements from one area to another quickly. The rugged landscape also created natural choke points, ideal for defensive actions, but hazardous for attackers unfamiliar with the terrain. For the Allies, this meant creating a decentralized defense with forces scattered around key coastal and inland areas. While this provided coverage, it also meant that if one area fell, such as an airfield or port, it would not be easily reinforced from another part of the island. The difficulty in cross-island movement was further compounded by narrow roads, limited infrastructure, and minimalized motorized transport. This terrain also provided excellent cover and ambush opportunities for local partisans and Allied troops who knew the environment far better than the invading Germans. From a tactical standpoint, the island's features influenced where battles were fought and how units were deployed. It forced both sides to adapt to the landscape, relying on small unit tactics, defensive strongpoints, and careful coordination. Ultimately, while Crete's geography was a challenge for everyone, it became a major asset for the defenders early in the conflict and a significant hurdle for the German forces had to overcome to succeed. Due to the lack of accessible flat terrain suitable for conventional landing craft, Germany devised an ambitious plan centered entirely on airborne forces. This bold approach was driven by necessity as much as innovation. The Germans planned to deploy waves of paratroopers across the northern part of Crete, specifically targeting critical infrastructure such as airfields, communication hubs, and key towns including Malim, Heraklion, and Rethymno. Their goal was to overwhelm Allied positions quickly before the defenders could organize a coordinated counterattack. The element of surprise was critical to this operation. The Germans hoped that by appearing from sky in large groups, they could exploit confusion and panic among the defenders. However, the terrain made these landings particularly risky. Paratroopers descended over mountainous terrain, olive groves, and rocky hillsides were highly vulnerable, both in the air and upon landing. Many were shot before they even reached the ground, and others were scattered far from their intended drop zones. Despite these challenges, once a foothold was secured, the Germans worked rapidly to capture airfields, most importantly the Malim airstrip. This allowed them to bring in reinforcements and heavy equipment. While the operation ultimately succeeded, it became a tremendous cost in manpower. The high casualty rate among the paratroopers shocked the German high command and led Hitler to later forbid future large-scale airborne invasions. Even though the strategy worked, the price of using airborne troops without initial ground support revealed the limits of such tactics in difficult terrain like Crete. While the Germans had the advantage of planning and initiating the invasion, the Allied forces were stuck in reactive and resource-constrained position. One of the greatest challenges faced by Allied troops was maintaining a steady flow of supplies and reinforcements to the island. With the Luftwaffe dominating the skies above Crete, air support was nearly impossible for the Allies. Any attempts to resupply by air were quickly intercepted or destroyed by German aircraft. This left the Royal Navy as the primary means of transportation, but even the sea routes were cut off. German air raids or Allied naval convoys inflicted severe losses, sinking or damaging many British ships trying to reach or evacuate the island. The lack of reliable resupply affected everything from ammunition and food to medical supplies and communication equipment. Allied forces were constantly running low on essentials, and reinforcements were few and far between. Compounding this, many of the troops stationed on Crete had already been worn down during the campaign on mainland Greece. They arrived with limited equipment and little time to dig in or fortify their positions. As the Germans gained control of key airfields, they choked off Allied supply lines even further, eventually making sustained defense impossible. Despite heroic efforts by Allied troops and local civilians to maintain resistance, the overwhelming logistical disadvantage played a crucial role in the outcome of the battle. In the end, Crete became a lesson on how air superiority and logistics can decisively shape the course of a military campaign. The primary objective for both the Axis and Allied forces during the Battle of Crete was control of the island itself, which held immense strategic value in the Mediterranean theater. For the Allies, retaining Crete meant maintaining a critical foothold in the region, which would allow them to support resistance movements in occupied Greece and boost morale among other nations under Axis occupation. The island's location had also provided a base for air and naval operations, making it a vital link in the chain of Allied defenses stretching across the Mediterranean. Losing Crete would not only weaken the Allied position, but also open the door for future German advances into the Middle East and North Africa, threatening vital supply routes and resources. For the Germans, capturing Crete was more than just territorial gain. The island offered a launch pad for future operations in Africa and southern Europe, and its airfields can be used to project power across the eastern Mediterranean. The German high command, particularly Hitler, was eager to secure Crete quickly so that attention and resources could be redirected to the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union. The rapid defeat of Allied and Commonwealth troops on Crete could also serve as demonstration of German military prowess, particularly the effectiveness of airborne operations, and would help solidify Axis control over the region. Ultimately, the Battle of Crete was a contest for strategic dominance, with both sides recognizing the island's importance and shaping the broader course of the war in the Mediterranean and beyond. Crete's significance during World War II extended far beyond its geographic boundaries. The island's rugged terrain and location in the eastern Mediterranean made it a key asset for controlling sea lanes and projecting military power. For the Allies, holding Crete meant safeguarding the Suez Canal and maintaining vital supply lines to North Africa and the Middle East. The island also served as a symbol of resistance, with its defense boosting morale among occupied populations and demonstrating that the Axis advance could be challenged. For the Germans, Crete represented an opportunity to disrupt Allied operations and secure a base for further campaigns. The successful airborne invasion showcased the potential of paratrooper assaults, influencing military tactics for the remainder of the war. However, the high casualties suffered by German paratroopers also led to reevaluation of such operations, making commanders more cautious in future engagements. The battle's outcome had lasting implications. German control of Crete allowed for the increased Axis activity in the Mediterranean, but the heavy losses sustained during the invasion tempered enthusiasm for similar operations. The Allies, meanwhile, learned valuable lessons about the importance of air superiority and rapid response, which would inform their strategies in later campaigns, including the invasion of Normandy. Beyond its military and strategic importance, the Battle of Crete had a profound impact on the morale in both the local population and Allied forces. The defense of the island, despite overwhelming odds, became a symbol of resistance against Axis aggression. Greek civilians played a crucial role, assisting Allied soldiers, sabotaging German operations, and providing intelligence. Their bravery inspired resistance movements not only in Crete, but throughout occupied Europe, demonstrating that ordinary people could make a difference in the face of tyranny. For the Allied troops, the battle was a test of endurance and resolve. The multinational force, known as the Crete Force, including the British, New Zealand, Australian, and Greek soldiers who fought side by side under difficult conditions. The camaraderie and determination displayed during the battle fostered a sense of unity and purpose, even as the situation became increasingly desperate. The German victory, while tactically significant, came at a high cost. The fierce resistance encountered on Crete forced the Germans to reconsider their approach to occupation and counterinsurgency, as the local population continued to resist long after the battle had ended. The legacy of the Battle of Crete extends beyond the immediate military outcome, highlighting the enduring power of human spirit and collective action in times of crisis. The German objectives in the Battle of Crete were clear and ambitious. By capturing the island, the Germans aimed to eliminate a key Allied base in the Mediterranean, securing their southern flank, and creating a springboard for future operations in North Africa and the Middle East. Control of Crete would also deny the Allies a valuable staging area for attacks against Axis positions in southern Europe. A swift victory was essential for the Germans as they sought to minimize the diversion of resources from the Eastern Front, where preparations for Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, were underway. The use of airborne forces in the assault was intended to achieve surprise and overwhelm the defenders before they could organize an effective response. The success of the operation would not only enhance Germany's strategic position, but also demonstrate the effectiveness of new military tactics, particularly large-scale airborne assaults. However, the high casualties suffered during the invasion led Hitler to reconsider the use of paratroopers in future operations, marking a turning point in German military doctrine. The Battle of Crete was shaped by the decisions and leadership of many key figures on both sides. General Kurt Student, commander of Germany's 7th Airborne Division, was responsible for planning and executing the airborne invasion. His innovative use of paratroopers marked a significant development in military tactics, although the high casualties suffered during the operation led to a reevaluation of such strategies. General Alexander Lohr, in charge of the German air forces, provided crucial support to the invading paratroopers, ensuring air superiority and facilitating the rapid deployment of reinforcements. On the Allied side, Bernard Freyberg, a New Zealander, led the defense of the island, coordinating a diverse force of British, Australian, New Zealand, and Greek troops. His leadership was instrumental in organizing the defense and overseeing the eventual evacuation of Allied forces. General Thomas Blamey, an experienced Australian commander, played a key role in coordinating the overall defense and response to the invasion. The actions and decisions of these leaders had a profound impact on the course and outcome of the battle, highlighting the importance of effective command in times of crisis. The Battle of Crete left a lasting The tactics employed during the Battle of Crete were as groundbreaking as they were risky. The German plan, dubbed Operation Mercury, centered around the surprise element of an airborne invasion, a first of its kind on such a large scale. German paratroopers, known as the Fallschirmjäger, were deployed at dawn on May 20th, 1941, targeting key strategic points such as the Moulin airfield and surrounding villages. The attack came under the cover of the morning light, catching the Allies off guard in both method and timing. German planners had correctly predicted that the Allies were anticipating a naval invasion. By launching a massive drop from the sky, the Germans not only disrupted Allied formations, but also managed to land forces directly in the midst of their defenses. However, this bold move came at a great cost. Many paratroopers were shot before they landed. Others were scattered and isolated. Yet, the tenacity of German tactics, supported by precision airstrikes, allowed them to consolidate positions quickly and apply relentless pressure. One of the key German tactical strategies was encirclement. Once on the ground, German troops sought to isolate and surround Allied positions, cutting off routes of retreat and resupply. The layout of Crete's terrain, full of mountain passes, narrow roads, and scattered villages, made these encirclement strategies particularly effective. German units often avoided frontal assaults in favor of flanking maneuvers and infiltration tactics, using their mobility to overwhelm fixed Allied defenses. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe maintained constant air superiority, targeting known defense positions and keeping pressure on Allied communication lines. The defenders found themselves increasingly fragmented, with many units cut off from headquarters or operating with incomplete information. Despite their initial control of much of the island, Allied forces were slowly pushed back, especially after the Germans captured the Maleme airfield and began flying in additional troops and equipment. From the Allied perspective, their tactical choices were defined more by desperation than the design. With limited air cover and poor coordination between multinational forces, Freyberg and his commanders focused on holding defense strongpoints and launching counterattacks when possible. One such effort was the counteroffensive at Maleme Airfield, an operation that, if successful, could have denied the Germans their crucial landing strip. However, confusion in communication and delays in reinforcements led to the effort falling short. As the battle dragged on, Allied tactics shifted towards survival and evacuation. Rearguard actions and delaying maneuvers were used to buy time for ships to arrive and extract troops. While these efforts were courageous and often heroic, they could not reverse the tide of the battle that had already begun to favor the Germans decisively. The final phase of battle revealed the brutal reality of tactical imbalance. German forces, though initially vulnerable, had by now established firm control of key roads, airfields, and communication lines. Their attacks became more coordinated and aggressive. Meanwhile, the Allies find themselves in an increasingly hopeless situation. With casualties rising, resupply impossible, and units becoming exhausted, even the most valiant resistance began to collapse. Naval evacuations were complicated by German air raids, and the retreating Allied forces suffered continuous bombardment. Despite this, pockets of defenders held out longer than expected, inflicting significant losses on the Germans and drawing praise for their resolve. In the end, however, the disparity in coordination, air support, and manpower proved too much to overcome. The tactical lesson from Crete was clear. Air superiority could decide the fate of ground battles. Technology was at heart of the Battle of Crete. The German airborne assault was one of the first large-scale deployments of paratroopers in modern warfare. Their glider and parachute technology, combined with precise Luftwaffe bombing raids, represented a new form of integrated warfare. While the initial drops were chaotic, the concept was revolutionary. These Fallschirmjäger units could bypass natural defenses, land behind enemy lines, and sow confusion instantly. German aircraft like the Junkers Ju-52 played a vital role in delivering troops, while fighters and bombers, especially the feared Stuka dive bombers, provided close air support. This created a deadly combination of surprise, speed, and overwhelming firepower. The operation demonstrated how control of the skies could determine the fate of battles, and the use of airborne units set a precedent that would influence future operations throughout World War II. The Allies, by contrast, were hampered by older, less effective equipment and a critical lack of air support. The British and Commonwealth troops were equipped for conventional warfare, not for a battle in which enemy fell from the sky. Anti-aircraft defenses were limited, and the few aircraft available were quickly driven off by the Luftwaffe. The Royal Navy, while formidable, was also vulnerable to German air raids, which inflicted heavy damage on several ships during evacuation efforts. In some cases, Allied vehicles and equipment were outdated, damaged, or even abandoned during the retreat from Greece. The defense of Crete became a showcase not only of bravery, but how critical technology superiority, especially in air power, had become in modern warfare. Now let's take a look at the timeline of events that unfolded over the course of the battle. On May 20th, the German invasion began with a massive airborne assault. Paratroopers were dropped over key towns, Maleme, Chania, Rethymno, and Heraklion, with the goal of overwhelming Allied defenders quickly. The first day saw intense fighting and heavy casualties on both sides. On May 21st, German forces captured the Maleme airfield, a decisive moment that allowed them to bring in reinforcements and heavier equipment. On May 22nd, Allied forces attempted to regroup and launch counterattacks, but were increasingly overwhelmed by relentless German air support and the flow of enemy reinforcements. From May 23rd to May 24th, German forces consolidated their positions and launched a sustained push southward, driving back Allied defenders. Casualties mounted rapidly. By May 26th, the Allies launched a final major counteroffensive, which failed to regain critical territory. The decision was made to withdraw. On May 28th, a mass evacuation began, with